Hello and welcome to the incoming video podcast, the show that looks back at the week's historical miniature releases. This is episode 24, which looks back at the new releases for week ending the 20th of November 2009. And as always, I'm your host, Neil Shook. Well, I'm cheating again this week. There have been more than 10 releases, but not enough to feature in another section of the show. And so, rather than a top 10 this week, I have a top 12. So let's crack right along and have a look and see what we've got for you this week. Okay, number 12, we have a new release from Pithead Miniatures, a company that have been producing stuff for quite some time, but have been completely off my radar. These are producing some early war World War II vehicles, and these are actually Belgian tanks and light vehicles. Rather an unusual release for one of the much more lesser-known factions of World War II. Some interesting little tanks here. At number 11, we have a new release from Black Hawk Games. Rather unusual to see one of these in the historical show. But this is a man-at-arms. And to be honest, although I suppose it's a fairly neutral pose, it's probably one of the better sculpts I've seen in recent times from Black Hawk. And whilst it's fairly nondescript as opposed to what particular uniform it's meant to be wearing, so, I think this is more of a generic sort of person from the period, it's not a bad sculpt. At number 10, we have some new releases from a company called Bear's Den Miniatures. Again, not a company I'm particularly familiar with. They are producing a 28mm range of Renaissance figures, and they've had a couple of new releases this week. We have some mounted gendarmes, which really look the business, actually. It's interesting looking at these historical figures. You can certainly see where some of the Empire Knights from Warhammer get their influence from, And we also have some Landsknechts. I much prefer the Knights from this particular release. But some interesting figures here. I think these are worth a look. At number 9, we have another new release from Foundry. And is it me, or in this particular release, have they missed the boat somewhat? Okay, these are Zulus, and we have lots of them. As you can see, we've got actually 2 complete range releases. 16 packs here in total. You have a selection of married and unmarried Zulus, kind of fairly standard poses. And then you have, and then the second range consists of character figures, more unusual poses, Zulus armed with rifles, that sort of thing. And one can only imagine that the reason they've released this is to coincide with the recent release of Black Powder, because obviously that particular rule set does have a section on the Zulu Wars. However, the problem is that, as we all know, if you're fighting Zulu Wars, you need hordes of Zulus. And whilst these are nice looking figures, they're certainly not the best Zulus I've seen by any way, shape or form. You look at anything produced by Copplestone, especially the stuff produced by Empress, and they're certainly better than these particular sculpts. And yet, here are Foundry still charging premium prices for what they're producing. They look quite nice, but would you pay £75 for 48 figures? Especially in the light of Zulus requiring hordes. For a decent Zulu Wars game, you'd probably want several hundred. So whilst a couple of the packs of the character figures might very well be useful, I can't see anybody these days buying all their Zulus in metal, especially when you have to buy so many and there's alternatives available. For example, Wargames Factory's plastics. I know not everybody likes plastic figures, but it's certainly a consideration. So I must admit, this particular release from Foundry, I just think they've missed the boat. I really do. And number 8, a new release from Crusader. We haven't seen anything from Crusader for a while. Quite unusually, we have some new Gladiators. Now, Gladiators seemed to be in vogue several years ago. Funny enough, when there was a film with the same name floating around. And we haven't seen any new releases for Gladiators for some time. So, although these are fairly decent looking figures, although I must admit a couple of them look a little bit short in the leg, and there are some unusual poses and some figures that you're not liable to see elsewhere, like the condemned criminals, against some more nice spectators and stuff. I can't help thinking these are maybe a little out of step. But having said that, there are some nice figures here. The Sagittarius is certainly a figure that you don't see very often, so that pack would be very useful. But on the whole, they're okay, nice enough, just a slightly unusual subject matter for the current period. And talking of unusual subject matters, number 7, we have a new release from Gripping Beast. And when I saw these, I thought, what? These are bizarre. I mean, they obviously fit into the historical period because they're real things, but these are Morris men. Why on earth would Gripping Beast want to release a group of Morris men? And what use would they be? Absolutely no idea. But all that said, the figures themselves have been produced excellently. They're really good and accurate to what you'd expect Morris men to look like. Very nicely sculpted. Interesting figures here. Just bizarre. No other word for it. Absolutely bizarre. Back to more familiar territory for our number 6 new release from Rebel Minis. These are 15mm modern US troops. We have a command pack and an infantry pack. As you can see, these are pretty standard fare. Nice usual selection of troops and nice usual selection of troops, weapons, poses. Workman-like stuff from Rebel. Nothing amazingly outstanding, but some nice looking figures. Into the top 5, and a new company. This is Mutiny Miniatures. Funny enough, knowing the name, they are concentrating on figures for the Indian Mutiny, that particular period of English history. And again, funnily enough, something which you could gain using black powder. But this is the first example that we've seen of their new releases. And if this is anything to go by, then I think this is a company that, if you're into this particular period, this is well worth looking at. This is a 53rd Foot Infantryman, and very nice it is too. Okay, change of scale for Bronze Age miniatures, my number 4. This is moving up to 54mm. Okay, we don't see many of these very often. This is quite a nice figure. I like the look of this a lot. This is a Napoleonic Highlander. It's an interesting looking figure. Considering it's 54mm, I'm not quite sure about the level of detail. I'm thinking it should be more detail than it actually is. It's a nice enough pose. However, I'm also wondering why on earth Scotsman's wearing a miniskirt. I mean, really, if you look at most people wearing kilts, you know, they come down to the knee. And my one major complaint with this figure is that he does appear to be wearing a kilt as designed by Mary Quant. But otherwise, nice enough figure. Number 3, new releases from a company called TB Line from Italy. These are some new Mongols in their Mongol cavalry range, and these are camel riders or even dromedary riders. We have some spearmen and we have some mounted archers. I just like the look of these. I thought they were visually appealing. As I'm sure somebody is bound to point out, the one issue they have, and in fact it's something that has been featured before with this particular line, the spears are a little thick. They do appear to be wielding small telegraph poles. So they may very well have been better off letting you use wire spears instead of the moulded ones. But other than that, I think these look alright. Number 2, and it's nice to see a new release from Copplestone Castings. And these are another release for his Darkest Africa range. And these are British sailors in Senate hats. I'm a big fan of Mark Copplestone. He does produce some excellent figures. Some people may complain that you look across these and there's little variety in the pose. There is another possible issue with the fact that they're very flat, two-dimensional poses. But with all those arguments aside, they're really well sculpted, they paint it really nicely, and the finished product looks really good. And so that's one reason why I'm always a big fan of Mark Copplestone. And I think these are as good as a lot of things he's done recently. Which leads me on to number 1. And back to Bronze Age miniatures, back to 54mm, and this time we're looking at a Ronin. Now from the look of things, this appears to be an earlier period samurai. Quite well armed for a Ronin, with both a sword and a naginata, but the subject matter appealed, and I was, on the whole, quite impressed with these figures. I'm not 100% sure whether they got the anatomy correct. I mean, he has very big pecs, and his features look somewhat gaunt, to say the least. Mind you, if he's a Ronin and he hasn't eaten for a couple of days, that might be the case. But I think this is a really interesting looking character study. As I'm a bit of a sucker for this period of Japan, then this is my number 1 for this week. And there we have it, quite a mixed bag of releases this week. And to be honest, this week in the historical side, there's been nothing that has leapt out and said, wow, that's an awesome looking figure. So, on the whole, a much more kind of low-key set of releases. But I hope you've seen something that you might find interesting. Well, that's all I have time for. Before I go, I just want to say a huge thank you to Bill at the Miniatures page and Zach at Tabletop Gaming News. Without these blogs, this show simply wouldn't be possible. And if you've enjoyed the show and you'd like to see it again, then you can always see it repeated on Warboots TV. Visit their webpage, go down to the bottom, they have loads of streaming videos, and all the incoming podcasts will appear there as well as on YouTube. So that's it. Take care until next time. Happy gaming, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.